I am your host, Tommy Rosen, and today I'm just delighted to be speaking with Durga Leela. Durga has been a yoga practitioner for 25 years, a grateful member of 12-Step Fellowship for over 18 years, and has studied and practiced yoga and Ayurveda for 17 years. She's a practical, down-to-earth, and to-the-point speaker who has worked diligently on her own path of recovery. She has a great sense of humor and a real warmth for understanding the trials and tribulations of our human condition. Welcome back. Thank you for being with us once again.
Thank you, Tommy. It's really an honor to be part of this conversation.
Thank you. I'm so glad. And as you know, the yogic path and the path of Ayurveda are for me, central pieces of my recovery. And I know for you as well. And every time we do this, I know there are new people, many new people, thousands of new people watching.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you wouldn't mind, once again, just a brief history of 5,000 years of Ayurveda and yoga, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, in a sentence or two.
Just a sentence.
Many people are drawn to yoga through the initial practice that they see of Hatha yoga. That's the practice on the mat. 12-steppers, I think, are often drawn to yoga for some idea of wanting instruction in meditation. And in truth, that would be more of the yogic path, because classical yoga is more of a psychological medicine. So it's going to heal the mind and move into work on deeper awareness. So away from the surface and the symptoms and down deep into the roots, the causes, the karmas. Whereas Ayurveda, yoga's sister science, really teaches how to treat disease, and it teaches principles of how to live in the world and live in your own physical body in a balanced, harmonious way. And that's a real simple proposition of saying the world out there is the 5 elements. You also are the 5 elements. If you could understand the balance of those 5 elements within you, and that balance as it goes through different ages and stages of your life, also as it goes through different states of balance, you know, in early recovery, mid-term recovery, long-term recovery as you age. And then you can work on a dynamic balance of your own inner constitution to your environment that you live in. So it's a very dynamic, ancient wisdom system that can be applied, and I've seen it applied in amazing ways as it's come to the West. It's a beautiful science, and many people just resonate with it. And mostly what I hear when I teach the Ayurveda piece of yoga recovery is it makes sense.
I love it. As you're talking about Ayurveda and yoga, it sounds to me literally like the opposite of addiction. You're speaking about balance. You're speaking about a dynamic respect for cycles and for changes, and addiction doesn't respect any of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So right there, people who are listening might be intrigued with the very idea that this is kind of like an antithetical proposition to addiction.
Mm-hmm.
What does one do to participate?
Well, I think the first way you participate, and I'll say it in the very clearest way that was taught to me by my teacher, is that you accept the point that you know that you don't know. So it's like an admission that the way that you've been doing things isn't working. You know, you're not getting the results that you want. And so you're ready to sort of throw your hands up in the air and say, I don't know. So you admit that you know that you don't know. And that's a really great first step. And then the second step, which we would call detachment or dispassion, is the idea that you're ready to give up that which it is not. So you're ready to let go of pursuing the wrong solution. And then from there, there's an opening that's like a cumulative, more will be revealed type of thing that you enter into a practice. And we classically know the practice as Hatha yoga practice. And I think many of us came to yoga through, well, I'm kind of interested in this, shoulder stand thing or a sun salutation. And I hear it's good for stress. And we step into a class and onto a mat. And so there's so much good work being done out there at that, almost like the physical embodied sense of the hatha yoga practice, putting us into our breath. And then from there, when you step into that, you'll go where your life leads you. So usually say the student will meet the teacher, and different teachers come along the way, and they'll open up that availability you have. And I think that availability is really according to your readiness for investigation. For me, how that happened, I was always a hatha yoga practitioner, as a practicing alcoholic, as a corporate job worker in London. And it really was the only thing I would do for myself that was healthy. And I really could only get through the class before I went back to the pub and got back into my old habits. Yes. But I did do it. But when I got sober, that was foundational in 12-step program. And it's funny because I never went to rehab. And I know you went to rehab. Many other people did. Not everyone will. I think I work a lot with the addictions that maybe rehab isn't really even there for them yet. So we come in and offer this system of self-understanding that helps people understand. Like, we often start yoga of recovery with the statement, our understanding of the problem defines the nature of our solution. And so people are mystified with the diagnosis of addiction. How bad does it have to get before you admit you're addicted? And why do we have to wait that long?
Yes.
So really, yoga and Ayurveda initially just deal with unhealthy attachments. So this idea of not knowing, that refers to ignorance, that refers to the spiritual side of the disease, that we are, in separation, which manifests as this ego nature. And just that very nature of separation puts us in a sort of existential stress.
Yes.
Where we might be grabbing for something that we have a strong desire to merge back to something that feels more stable, secure. And you could use the words like lasting, eternal, unchanging. And then the yogis say that is your very nature. So don't worry about it. Rest, and then discover, and then expand and grow in consciousness from this, just a perfect path of inquiry and creative self-discovery. And all the yoga paths, like if we learn to meditate in a way that's devotional, and we learn to use the yamas and niyamas, which are the ethical foundation, then we begin to proceed to have things in life that will stabilize our choices. Because the culture doesn't give us much guidance. If anything, the culture pushes you towards more and more of, like, rejecting, self-loathing. There's something out there that can fix me.
Instantly.
We're all prone to it, whether we're in active addiction or in a path of recovery.
Yes. Thank you.
Does that explain that in any way?
Yeah, so much and so well. And, Durga, I wish I had, a nickel. I wish I had a nickel for everyone who's ever come up to me and said, I can't really get started with yoga because I know I'm not good at it. I'm not good at yoga.
Yeah.
Or I'm so tight in my body, I can't get on that mat and face, so for those who might be watching who are curious and hopefully inspired by Durga and what she has created and what she's offering, can you speak to that person? What would you say somebody comes to you? So
I would say, firstly, if you're breathing, you can do yoga, because it really starts with the inhale and the exhale. And we called our work yoga of recovery, because one of the things that I clearly saw was that the 12 steps are a really shortened version of the wisdom path of the yogic system. So you have this idea of the availability of developing your devotional nature, so surrendering to something that's higher than yourself. You have the ability of moving into active service, where you just go out and help someone less fortunate than yourself. And these are not things that have to do with the tightness of your muscles. That also, that will develop around even just going out and expanding your ability to give and receive. That will open your muscles as well. So, and then this idea of like ethical foundational living and understanding how your mind works, and being able to apply yourself to that in a disciplined daily practice. And then the whole concept of really just, who am I? And we really come from this idea of, what if that's the fundamental question of the deepest path of yoga, the Jnana Yoga or Vedanta, the wisdom path of yoga, then the question is, what does it feel like when you don't know? So what does it feel like when I don't know who I am? And that's where most of us are. So the way that we can approach the path of yoga is that any skilled practitioner can hear in your conversation what your heart is calling for as a practice. And then we can make that your foundational practice. And then we can build the other practices around it, just so it's an integrated practice. So you don't get fanatical. Like, say the person who becomes too devotional might become fanatical, that it's like, it's my God and not your God. You know, it's Jesus, not Krishna. You know, it's Allah, not Buddha. And you see that happen. Whereas yoga wants us to believe in the idea of consciousness that can take any form, because the power that it is beyond all name and form. So if we can watch for that, we can watch for the heart's calling, and then integrate the other yogas in there in the path. So for instance, when I was younger, I loved hatha yoga. That was what brought me in. That me getting on a mat, going through an hour and a half of practice, I'd leave the yoga session just elated, type of thing. Yes. And they would ask me to stay and do some chanting, and I'd say, whoa, I am not doing that.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. I just thought that was so weird. It was a strange proposition. And you know, now I was just with Gauravani here in Florida, and I couldn't wait to get in there, because it's so restful to just chant and sing and be joyful and have that as a practice. And so the different practices really develop all these different integrated aspects of our nature. But I think it takes that skillful practitioner to be able to see which one that the person will resonate with, and give them a practice that their own lifestyle and availability, whether it be time, money, practice time, you know, that they can fit into that path. And as soon as that opens, it's like that little chink of light that will come in, and the light will slowly increase. And I think one of the biggest things that I notice when I'm working with people, and how can I say this, that they believe every change that they're going to make throughout their lifetime of recovery, the future, is going to feel as hard and difficult as the initial steps that they've taken. And I found that not to be true.
Yes.
Because once that yoga starts to dawn within you, you know, that capacity for clarity or self-initiating another change rather than being forced into it, then there's some ease in that.
Yes.
And so to sit maybe in today when you're trying to give something up, that is pretty difficult. And so the 12 steps have always asked us to surrender to that higher power. And I do think that is a beautiful thing, but it's very hard to explain how you do that. I mean, it happened to me, and I can't tell you how it happened to me, because I do believe that my initial sobriety was a pretty profound spiritual experience that my ego was too busy to notice.
Yes.
But still, it had happened. And so I found myself living a sober life and having to situate myself in a world where everything had changed, but really nothing had changed.
Right.
So I was drawn to some practices, and my ego said, not there. You know, I've talked to you about being handed a tambourine and things, like, no, not there. This doesn't fit this like cool image I have of myself. Yeah. No, but that cool image of myself was a drunken, you know, out of control alcoholic, you know. So I was aware, like, I need to let go of this idea of my likes and dislikes.
Yes.
And so at some point I said, you know what, I didn't really relish every step in those 12 steps. I didn't relish everything that I was asked to do. So let me approach this yoga path with the same thing. And the fundamental thing that I learned in life, and it was through the 12 steps, is that when a person of trust, I would say, asks you to do something of service, you just say yes.
Yes.
And that's a good way to approach the yogic path. When you have a trusted teacher and they ask you to do something, you say yes, how, rather than no.
It has,
but for me, it's like this, you know, my specialness makes me need something.
it has always served me. Listen to that advice. And I want to jump into something that's coming to my mind for a moment, Durga. You spoke about how things get easier.
Yeah.
Part of the way that's happened in my life is because I've made a lot of mistakes. And when I've been down and been in a place that was painful or challenging or difficult through recovery, whatever it was, I'd get through it. And I would have the experience of having gotten through it. Next time I found myself in a similar situation or predicament, I could remember, well, this is challenging, but I got through it. My own experience showed me that I could get through it. When I work with people who are new, just to your point, they don't yet have the benefit of the experience of having overcome something. And so I just think there's this hugely important thing about steadiness of practice through the ups and the downs of life, and understanding that you may not yet have the understanding or the experience, the direct experience of having overcome. But that doesn't mean that you can't overcome. And when you have that experience, this stuff will get easier.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's a really good point, that like, as I move into this field, you know, I'm aware of how we interact with psychologists, for instance. And so the psychologists in the medical field have really picked up on this terminology of trauma.
Yes. Yes.
So in yoga recovery, we've also picked up on that, because we would say that, you know, that spirit coming in to live another karmic university challenge life it's another episode of like almost traumatic event, just life itself. Yes. But we use things like ancestor rituals, and we use things like coming from tribal people. And there's this thing that I was taught that I call the you pick tribe questions. And so we have these people do this exercise, which is the 10 story types told by the elders to pass on to the generations that are coming up, to tell them how they dealt with adversity, how they got through it, so that the generations can survive into the future. That was the job and the duty of the elders of the tribe. And so they tell stories of, and it might sound strange, but hunter success and subsistence activities and how you get your education. Now, the thing with modern day psychology is that it's lost a lot of its collective consciousness response. So I come from a line of people, and they're tremendous people. They were not perfect people. Addiction is in my family. But as you talked recently about your mother, you know, I can look at my mother was also an alcoholic. So there was things that I was learning in my household that were difficult. And almost because the brain has that hypervigilance around danger, sometimes you get a little stuck there. But as you move into recovery and you soften into a broader picture, then you can start to see some of the people that are around you that, again, they weren't perfect, but they had developed their own resilience. They had overcome their own ordeals, and they were doing their best to, you know, survive and thrive. And we can say that they succeeded because you're here. You know, the fact that you're here means that your people taught you something, because, you know, life's pretty difficult. You know, it's known throughout that it's like a eat or be eaten world that we live in. And then once we take care of that, it's interesting, because right now I'm teaching in Vietnam, and I'm teaching and working with people in India. And then when they're here, they really recognize this, like, a great manifestation of the problem that relates to the relationship life that people are in. And that's generally right underneath the addiction problem. Yeah. And it's like that separate self trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist in a way. Because, and you get what I'm saying there, that person has overcome ordeals and they just can't see it because they've narrowed their perspective too much into that. And Swami Sivananda calls it the cancer of individuality. You know, they've gone into that exiled isolation state. And it's through almost trying to solve this ego problem that is a false problem to start with, because you are never a separate being. You know, your real nature is part of the one, the wholeness.
Yes.
And I think if our education taught us more about that, more about a skilled community consciousness, and like even psychology moving more towards that collective consciousness, we'd be helped by that.
Yes. Well, I think you're hitting on some things that people who like peer-reviewed science have a problem with some of the spiritual concepts that are being laid out here. And at the same time, quantum physics is actually proving the oneness of everything. Like we're starting to see that there is actual proof of the connected nature of the entire universe, or multiverse, as you will. But, you know, bringing it down to people who are, you know, on this path of recovery, I want to sort of get down to sort of a more practical, what really happens, what do you project, what would you like for people to take place in between? Let's just assume people are going to meetings, and let's assume people are going to participate in yoga, which we both agree is an amazing 1-2 punch and approach that really, really works to stave off addiction one day at a time and to build an incredible life. So if you've gotten that and you're going to your meetings and you're going to the mat, you know, does that become your life, or are you getting a life because you're doing those activities? And how do you approach the rest of your life? So sort of in between the mat and the meeting, as you like to put it.
Yeah. So that's interesting. You just said, does that become your life, or do you get a life because you're doing those things? And, you know, honestly, at some point, I think maybe in early recovery, and then also, like you say, when you're really challenged, it might become your life. You know, like, as long as I get to a meeting, as long as I stay sober this day, and I get to my practice, then, you know, I'm okay for today. But I wouldn't think that would be the long-term thing. So, like, what would I say? Around 1.5 to 2 years sober, having done that for a while, that I really needed, I use this word blossom. I needed to blossom into a more creative, artful, heartful life. And that was like a deep desire of my soul. So I was lucky that I found Ayurveda at that point. So I already had 12 steps, I already had Hatha Yoga, and I was being drawn into like meditation practices. And so, yeah, I call the Ayurveda piece of yoga of recovery between the mat and the meeting, because I noticed that, you know, that embodied self had to make choices, whether it's to do with how I'm going to eat, my exercise, you know, am I going to get to sleep at night accordingly? You know, have I exercised? What have I eaten that day? My whole activities. And then just the mood swings that I had just around like my stress response reaction sort of thing. So my word for stress response is irritable. Like, I get a little impatient and irritable that no one's doing things as well as I think they should be.
Is that right?
And I'm 18 years sober, it still comes up. You know, it's like, it's instant like this. So all I get between myself and someone that's just coming into recovery, like where I was at year 1, 2, or 6 months or whatever, is I just have a longer pause point. And then I have a kind of an understanding of myself as a fire type, for instance. And then that's where a fire type goes under stress. It gets a little punchy, you know, and we could say, who's to blame? It's not me, someone out there pointing the finger. And so then I just pause enough to bring it back to me. And I say, I'm reacting like this because, you know, where am I attaching in desire? and then I can breathe it away, I can walk it away, I can do something really simple. Like I'll say to people, like, light a short incense and sit for a minute and just smell, like for the length of an incense, drink a glass of water, like light a candle and sit and stare at it for a few minutes just to change your mind. So what I'm describing there is access to that psychology through the five senses, that they are the gateways of the fuel of the mind. And so if we can learn, and this is what Ayurveda teaches us, medicine of the five senses, then we can stop being in such a reactive mode all the time. And that medicine can be really, it can be really, really lovely. Like one of my go-tos is some essential oils. So I can just get, the little bottle of lavender like this, which is maybe $15. And I can hit that point of my own nature that's still there, more often than I would like it to be sometimes. And I can just take a few minutes just to inhale on lavender oil, and it's like, I can bring this down. And sometimes I could do that with just my breath, but sometimes like I enjoy the play that Ayurveda gives us with the five sense therapies. So we also start our day like that. So a lot of the Yoga of Recovery's Ayurveda section is that we learn how to wake up in the morning and move into a system of loving self-care that's kind of quick and simple, but it stabilizes the system. And then you move out into the world, kind of like maybe as you stabilize into recovery, you feel more steady as you make big life choices and things. But you create that every single day by living one day at a time.
Yes.
And so we just have things like wake up in the morning and scrape your tongue and rinse your eyes and put some oil on your skin. And it seems like it's such a, just these are the things you do, cosmetic. But it really has a very profound effect on the whole system, especially the nervous system.
Yes. Yes.
And can you imagine that the psychology could be balanced just by simple daily things that you would do?
Yes.
That would be like brushing your teeth. But it really does happen. And it's funny because, like, what can I say? I'm just amazed at how much science kind of misses this interconnected whole that we are. And it's an amazing system. So recently I was studying iRest, Integrative Restoration Institute's Yoga Nidra. That's a evidence-based practice for trauma, pain, and addiction.
Yep.
And we saw the picture. I mean, maybe you can find one and put it up, but it's the homunculus.
Homunculus, yep.
So where they put the receptor sites that are in the brain and they scale the different
yes.
motor organs and sense organs accordingly.
Yes.
So that, like, the hands are enormous.
Yes.
In that picture. So what's the Ayurvedic, like the one that we love the best of all is that you take your hands and massage them onto your skin. So all the brain function, the cortex from the hands is being affected by you doing that massage.
Yes.
And then the other one is the mouth and lips. So even by scraping your tongue, you're doing something that affects the entire brain.
Yes. Thank you, Durga. Well, a couple of very important points. I love that you bring the simplicity to this. This doesn't have to be complicated. Mm-hmm. A few very, very simple things and acts of self-care go a very, very long way.
Yeah.
Also, very important to underline the fact that people who are new imagine and envision that this is going to become their life, meaning this being like, oh, I'm going to be going to meetings for the rest of my life and it's always going to be the same way and there's never going to be a shift and I guess this is just how it's going to be. And most people don't like that proposition. And I think because on some very deep level, we understand that there's transformation and there's evolution ongoing. There's always change. We're going to want that. And so it's very important that you bring up this concept of stages of recovery, that in the beginning of your recovery, you needed something. And for me too, for 5 years, I dedicated myself to the 12 steps. Mm-hmm. And I got to a place mentally and emotionally and spiritually where I had a level of freedom that could allow me to learn and to explore and to grow in different areas of my life. And then my life became very, very rounded and rich and filled with new experience and a lot of excitement and joy as a gift of recovery. So I just want people to understand that while one might need to devote themselves and be very focused on a program of recovery as the central thing that's going on in the beginning, it becomes sort of a part of you. So it's not really, in my experience, I'm living recovery every day, but I'm not like, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. I'm just free. And I get to do the things in my life that are good for me because I would choose those activities. And it's not hard for me anymore in that way. I still have things that I need to be disciplined about or things that I need to work on. That's coming up all the time because I'm a human being. But it isn't anything like the way it was for me at the beginning. I'm stages away from that now, and it's really changed. So thank you. And if you want to comment further on that and how Ayurveda and yoga can help you continue down that path.
Yeah, I love how you're saying that. It's you can't even conceive of it. Like I always used to sit in 12-step meetings and they would say, you'll comprehend the word serenity. And I just love how they say comprehend it, like, because you've got no clue what serenity is about. I thought it was like going to be so boring. And I'd kind of ramped up my life that I needed to live. That was part of my addiction, was that once I had the allergy response. So once that thing was introduced into me, I was like a woman on a mission that I had to live everything that night. Like it was the last night of my life type of thing. And so this idea of serenity was like, well, this is going to be terribly boring. And I think one of the things that really, really helped me was I needed to be around people who exampled serenity to me, because my concept of it just wasn't true to what it is, because my concept of it came from this reactive, dramatic mind that I lived in. And that the nature of that mind is as it projects into the future, it gets it very wrong. So it's the same addictive mind. You know, for instance, every substance in the world is pretty neutral. It's the mind's attachment to that substance that makes the addiction. You know, and we know this by the dopamine stuff. The brain scientists are getting that too now. Yes. So it's my mind's capacity to attach into a concept and make it like either like exaggerated to the point that I've got to have this thing and I've got to have it right now because my life depends on it, or I'm not moving anywhere towards that because that really is going to, like, it's going to kill me through like boredom sort of thing. So that mind. So the idea, and we talk about it a lot, the community, the satsanga, the fellowship, you know, the idea that you're actually able to be with someone that can, like in a very subtle way, sort of example what it's like to live from that more stable, serene place. And I would say that in my life, like I really recognize it now that I'm around some people that have a devotional nature, and I can see them shining and, you know, smiling from somewhere inside that is kind of, it's just so attractive to me. Yes. And it wasn't so much to begin with. I was like, here's the thing, I was almost annoyed by them. Like they had something I just didn't get. And so I would look at them and think, whatever you're feeling, I'm just not getting it. So like I needed something a little bit more active for me to participate. But now I can look around a room and I can see people doing things that, you know, 5 or 10 years ago, I wouldn't have connected with it. And now I can connect with it. But you have to show up in the company of those people just to even get the feeling of it, because like in a textbook or in some conversation, it doesn't really work like that. So in my work, I've been sitting like, how do you meet the people that have the need? You know, and I know you do the same thing. Like, where do you meet them? For how long should they come in and spend with you? How long should they be sober before they come to people like us? Because we're not running rehabs and detoxes. And when you have a disease-based medical model, everything is concentrated on the alcohol and drug users with the first 28 or 90 days.
Yes.
And I can hardly believe how much press and media is given to that aspect of the problem. Whilst, you know, we already have a 20 million treatment gap at that level, and that doesn't really include all the people affected by the addictions. Well, so, you know, I've made the decision to take people to India for this treatment. And, you know, that is a by invitation only. And of course, the Recovery 2.0 people are invited. So you can email me, durga@yogarecovery.com.
Yes.
And again, I say, like, don't email me unless you're pretty certain that you want to come, because, you know, people like you and I, we're trying to do our best with like the energy that we have, and we're not superheroes. And you know what the email inbox is like. So it's just like, if you really feel that resonates and you're ready to go, then I can talk to you, because I need to make sure this, you are the sort of person that can be helped by such a deep retreat where you have to be patient.
Yes.
Did you want to say something?
Yes. Because you're bringing it up, we have to discuss this. So for everybody who's watching, we're talking about living a great life and addressing things that come up in your life as they come up. Mm-hmm. There's nobody in the world of recovery who doesn't understand the concept and the necessity for detox. Mm-hmm. And so we just recognize and have come to understand through decades of recovery that detox is not a once and then you're done. There's detox, for example, for the person at the beginning who's coming off of heroin, for example, you're detoxing off of heroin or alcohol or an amphetamine or whatever it is. There's an initial level of detox, and then there are another 1,000 levels beneath that. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we're fortunate, we keep that in our mind as people in recovery, and we start looking through our life and building into our life these moments of detox. Mm-hmm. Now, Durga, I want you to speak about this very, very profound thing that you just mentioned about taking people to India for this treatment, because number one, I haven't had that experience myself yet, and I'm looking for it. I'm really looking for it, and I'm very interested in it. And maybe we can, you know, bring a bunch of Recovery 2.0 people with us to do this. But it's so profound, a detox, and it's for people at the right moment, as Durga is saying. It's not just for anybody at any time. Mm-hmm. And so if you could speak, you know, just spend a couple minutes on that, because it's a really important thing. For people to understand this concept in a bigger way and the opportunity that you're presenting. Mm-hmm.
So let me say how I'm doing it right now is that people who have attended a course with me and I've met you face to face, that's who the initial invitation goes out to. And so my slots fill up through that. And currently I do it 1 to 2 months a year, January, February time. And so I've already met people for 7 days. Now, that's a choice for me, 7 days, 14 days, 18 days, 28 days, like down in our Bahamas ashram, for instance, because I do think it takes a while for people to arrive, decompress, you know, acclimate to the places that I'm offering these things, which are ashrams, kind of like you told me you teach in similar places. So then it's not all down to me to be the person that provides everything that's needed. Like, these are very secure places where they've built up like stable, disciplined daily routines, and everybody knows how to work together. So it's really pretty amazing. And what I was talking about, the company aspect, is that people, when they come into a retreat, it's just pretty amazing to watch people in recovery like sort of scoop together and form that self-healing unit as well, and that's beautiful. So that's something that we need to see generally before we could take you on a big trip like that. So who would come on a trip like this, for instance? I mean, people don't understand the work that I'm doing. So recently I was at a big recovery conferences, and one of the speakers was up there with the police and the social workers and the ambulance drivers talking about the opiate crisis. Now, I'm not working on frontline heroin addiction opiate crisis, yeah? But the person who was leading that talk, I'm looking after her, yeah? So she's able to be in that field doing what she does because she's in the care of yoga recovery and she's a yoga practitioner. And so as she goes through whatever medical conditions come up in her recovery, and then she comes out with us and we put her through treatment for those things. Also, the mothers of addicts, so they have heart issues, they have stress-borne diseases, and so they come with us out to India as well. I've had people in recovery from heroin that are on Suboxone, and they're progressively getting ready to reduce in line with their medical doctor's advice, but maybe they might achieve that in that month of detox, where they're fully supported by a medicine system that can help flush everything out the system. So if you think of the metabolic disrepair that people are living in after years of taking in drugs and alcohol and eating disorders and just the way stress, what it does is first impacts the digestive system. So as you go into flight, fight mode, what happens is the energy is going out into the limbs and it's not in the digestive system. So there's this great disrepair at the metabolic level, and you're going to see them talking now about the microbiome, and all that has to do with inflammation, and that's got to do with depression and things. And this is the Ayurvedic medicine system. And then that has to be, the detox has to be taken care of progressively. So you have to kind of get to know the body, get the body to relax, and then generally toxins will shift out from the deeper layers of tissues into the GI tract. And then a process of elimination can happen. And that's a 3 to 4 week process. So you can do quicker ones within the US and they're useful. But I just decided, because it was my own personal practice, that I would become available to take people to India, where the treatments are more skillful, the resources are there, the oils, the plants, the resource that they have, and the understanding that they have of the treatments and their relationship to nature at that herbal medicine level is more profound than the majority of Western practitioners that I've seen.
Yes.
My Indian doctors know what's wrong with you as you walk in to sit down to talk to them. They're so observant. It's amazing.
Yes, incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So for the folks who are watching, Durga, just tell them your website and how they can get involved in your trainings and the workshops that you're offering, and then ultimately, if they are called to the deeper work, they can join you in India sometime.
Mm-hmm. And so the website is yogaofrecovery.com. And my email address is Durga, Durga for Apple, it's my accent, at yogaofrecovery.com. And I think after we speak during this conference, the next time you'll see me out teaching is at Yogaville, which everybody just loves. There's a place called Yogaville, and it's in Virginia, next to Charlottesville, which is a place that last year, had some things go on. So, come and be part of the healing that this planet so desperately needs. Show up and, don't sit around complaining about politics or whatever, just get involved.
Yes.
So 45 minutes, I think that is, from Charlottesville, and it's a 7-day, and that's the Ayurveda piece between the mat and the meeting, yoga of recovery. And then I'm out teaching for most of the rest of the year, and this India trip will happen in January, February time. And if you want to know about that, you can email me. Preferably just come to Yoga of Recovery, and then once you've been on that, then generally you receive the invitation. And I'll make sure that I feel, because it's a 3 to 4 week commitment and things, I just have to know that it's the right time for you to do that. Yeah.
Yes.
You have to have a certain amount of stability. So there's loads of people on the recovery path that need that next level of help. And what I really found was, if I went to the medical institution as it is today, pretty much I was offered, my last injury that I had was a shoulder from carrying my backpack, schlepping, as I call it, across the planet. So what I was offered was drugs and surgery. And now, you know, my shoulder's in perfect condition, and I didn't do either of those things. What I did do was go and do this treatment. And there's, I don't know, there's an ability and an availability and an opportunity for contemplation. And I think that's also needed. I mean, I think to be in recovery, you have to like withdraw a little bit from that full-on assault of the egotistical living situation that most of us are in. And so I do it, and I feel like I get like my battery charged. I feel good. And what it did for me was things like I had been an asthmatic as a child, and then, you know, clever addict. I took up smoking at the age of 14 along with all the other things.
Very clever. Very clever.
It was a good idea for an addict. And, you know, I was a smoking fiend. And then I got off cigarettes in my early recovery. That was part of my recovery process. But I didn't get off of the inhalers. And so it was the Ayurvedic medicine that got me off the inhalers. And that was another key in the door to my freedom, not having to take steroid drugs orally. It was amazing.
Well, Durga, all I can say is thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I want everyone to hear this. The options available to us for getting sober and staying sober and thriving in life are many. And many options. We're coming into the light ages. This is not the dark ages. If you open up a newspaper, you'll feel like it's the dark ages. It's not. So lots of options out here, and all that one has to do is take one step in this right direction, and I believe the universe will take 10 steps toward you. So Durga, thank you so much for this work. I'm encouraging, well, number one, I want to do let's team up finally, please, and let's do something this year or next year together. Find a way to do that, and take advantage of what Durga has to offer if this calls to you. There's some profound openings and joy waiting for you on the other end. So I hope that you all will take advantage. Durga, thank you so much for joining us again. This is 10 in a row that we've done together. So,
and I want to say again, Tommy, you have changed my ability to be able to do this work. You know, a lot of the people that show up write down Recovery 2.0. That's how they heard about me. And you know, a lot of people that have gone on my retreats come on your retreats. They go on Nikki's. So I love that. It's like this family that, you know, we share this together. And you and I have taught together at the Recovery Symposium in the Bahamas. And Nikki's with me next year at that symposium. So, you know, consider this a family. And it's not the same thing. Even although we're all teaching some version of yoga and things, it's a very different experience. And what makes it really the big experience is the people who show up. And that's the amazing thing. That we aspect of that particular retreat is a big part of the healing. So for you, I really honor the work that you do, because it's been such a big help to a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Durga, so much. Love you so much, and look forward to more collaboration down the road.
Yes, absolutely. Satnam.
Satnam, take good care.